familiar faces. Not quite hearing your voices yet, but anyway. Good afternoon and welcome to Victory Office's webinar on leading the recovery. We are joined by three incredible market leaders who will share their insights on leadership in our current environment. However, before we get started, I do have some housekeeping items to cover. My name is Wendi Dawson and I'm the Chief Brand Officer for Victory Offices, and I'll be moderating our discussion. Assisting me with technology and questions is the lovely Kate, our events coordinator. And as this webinar is being recorded, clearly your microphones have been placed on mute. We do encourage networking with one another, so feel free to place your LinkedIn URL in the chat box, and we'll share those with everyone who does in the post-event email. We do have a fair bit of information to get through this afternoon that we want to share with you, and whilst I do want this to be an interactive session, please post your questions via the chat box or Q&A. I'll do my best to weave those questions as we go along, but in reality, we may need to park them towards the end. So now let me introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Marianne Roux. Marianne is founder and consulting director of Roux Consulting. She has 28 years global experience as a new world of work strategist, professor of practice in executive and MBA education, and an HR executive. In addition to Roux Consulting, Marianne is an associate of Mercer, Melbourne Business School, and Swinburne University of Technology. Marianne consults on the new world of work and how organizations, leaders, teams, and individuals can prepare themselves for it. Her PhD research focuses on a model of leadership and leadership development in the new world of work, and grounded in systems thinking, complexity theory, and adult development. And if that wasn't enough, Marianne has recently published a book. It's the Personal Agility Reflection Journal, Knowing Your Superpowers. The journal is designed to be of help to help you be a success in the changing world. Our second panelist is Ingrid Maynard, founder and managing director of The Sales Doctor. For more than 20 years, Ingrid has worked with organizations such as The Body Shop, Officeworks, SAI Global, Foxtel, Swinburne University, Deakin University, and across multiple industries to transform their sales leaders, salespeople, and processes. Ingrid consults with organizations on sales strategy, customer experience, high performance, and human connection. Lastly, we are joined by John Rogers, who is the CEO of Strategy and Operations of Wilson Group. JR joined Wilson Security in 2006 as the National Operations Manager. And as a disciplined strategic thinker and a highly experienced business leader, JR has held a number of significant roles within the group. Prior to this, JR had a successful 21-year career within the New Zealand Army, holding a range of senior roles. JR has a passion for the study and exercise of leadership as a core skill for leaders throughout the depths of any organization. So before we get started, what I want to do is just set the scene a little bit and kind of perhaps recap a little bit of clearly what we've all been experiencing and know to be true. But there's some really scary numbers when I went back to reflect on where we're at. So the pandemic started 4, maybe 5 months ago, depending on how you're counting, maybe as early as January. But in Australia specifically, we've had significant job losses. Almost 600,000 jobs were lost in April. Another 228,000 or so were lost in May. Officially, we're in a recession. We've got border closures. Boy, do we know that in Victoria. And almost every industry sector has been experienced with drastic downturns in revenue, and some of them have even been decimated, such as airline, travel, tourism, hospitality, restaurants, higher education, retail, the arts. Additionally, the complexities and uncertainties in business are greater now than they have been in almost 100 years, because we're managing diminished resources, working online or working from home, and managing remotely. Maintaining relationships with customers who are not in a position to buy. And also there's the uncertainty of what will happen when JobKeeper funding stops. There's also the increase in mental health issues. Sadly, Australia has 3,500 suicides each year. That number is actually forecasted to double. Leaders are also confronted with the reality of that what we have done to respond in these economic times and lead our businesses may not be enough to navigate the way forward. So what do we do? What's worked well in the respond phase to COVID, but also how do we move on into recovery? So Ingrid, you first. As sales is in the front line of any business, what are your observations? What do you see that's working and what's not working in businesses?
Well, thanks, Wendi. Yeah, there's a few things that companies that I'm working with and companies that I'm speaking with are doing that's really working for them in this new market. The first thing is just realigning their business with market and marketing demand. So they're responding to the current situation quickly, proactively. You know, one client of mine, their old category leader used to be printer paper, it's now sanitizer. So they've really had to look at their whole supply chain in order to make sure that it's in line with what their market now demands. The other thing that I've noticed too is that customers, you know, even before Victoria went into lockdown, but it's still the case around Australia, is that customers have changed the way that they want to engage with businesses as well. So there's less of a requirement or less of an appetite to see people in person on site because it creates a whole layer of complexity and administration that they really don't have the mental capacity to deal with anymore. So it's really about making sure that we reduce that pressure when we go to market. So when I'm talking about, you know, the way that my customers have done that well is they're using phone and forums like this, Zoom, whatever their technology platform is, in order to have that face-to-face connection, but it's remote and it's thoughtful, it's respectful, and it's making sure that that distancing has been taken on board. So the ones that are doing well have accepted that, they've adopted it quickly and effectively, you know, and so they've accepted it, they're getting skilled at it and they're getting out there and they're taking action. The second thing that they're doing well is reducing the cost of sales and increasing output from existing resources. And I think that this is the thing that we'll increasingly see. We're already seeing businesses restructuring, realigning their teams to be far leaner. So when I talk about cost of sales reducing, I'm not just talking about headcount, I'm talking about the way in which businesses go to market and think about going to market. So just something as simple as, you know, and it happened because we were forced into that situation in the first lockdown, working from home and using this kind of forum. When you think about all of those people who would traditionally, in my space, be on the road, selling in person, they can do that. They can do more in the time that they've got by just staying home and making those connections virtually or on the phone. So, for example, four face-to-face meetings a day might now be 6 because they can, which is an extra 500 opportunities a year. So if we kind of think about the opportunity that actually exists here to do more with the resources that we've got, there's great opportunity available. And some other businesses are starting to think about that and go, well, actually, do we centralise our sales function? So do we mainly make it, for the most part, a phone and a video-based team with minimal face-to-face interaction? The other things that they're doing well is they're retraining salespeople to work in this environment. Now, one of the realities is that most people, I think there's about 2 generations that have never worked in an adverse economic environment. I mean, yeah, we had a little bit of a downturn back in 2006-07, but that's nothing compared to what we're about to face. And we haven't even scratched the surface there, in my opinion. So when we talk about getting people ready for that, I'm not talking about scaring the pants off them. I am talking about getting them to be thinking a little bit differently. So rather than, that's not my job, that's not my role, a key attribute that I think will be really fundamental for any employer and the businesses that are doing well, have people on the bus who are resourceful, who are thinking about different ways of approaching problem solving and different challenges, so that it's not about throwing money or marketing at an issue. It's about resourcefulness and ideas. Retraining leaders. Leaders are obviously going to be key to helping their teams navigate through this time of uncertainty. You know, I was saying, having a bit of a chat before, uncertainty is the new certainty. That's certainly what we can be expecting. So, you know, being able to coach teams remotely to make sure that, you know, I'm managing performance in a way that I need to, so I've got my finger on the pulse, but also adding to all of that toolkit, you know, I'm able to look after their mental health, their emotional health, breaking down performance targets so that there's some certainty there around what I need to do next, how I'm going to go about doing it, and making sure that my team have that. And then just getting them prepared for any reality, you know, being lean so that they can respond faster, having direction with shorter tactical plans, because really it might just be the next 90 days that we have visibility over, because let's face it, what's happened in the last 90 days, in Victoria anyway, you know, is different. I mean, Tuesday, in 24 hours, the world changed. So things like that aren't working is an over-reliance on existing customer relationships. So mining those to the point of strangling the life out of them, you know, continuing to get out there. Okay, it's changed. The way that they do that's changed, but new business is absolutely important. People need to get out there adding life to their pipelines, because sales is critical. Without sales, you don't have a business. You know, what else isn't working? Well, thinking that technology is everything, thinking that marketing is the answer to everything. It isn't. It's a tool. So we need to use technology in that way and focus on the technology that's going to build personal relationships better. Mistaking price with value. Just because things are tough doesn't mean that we go about discounting. If I discount, someone can come in under me and discount. It's a race to the bottom. People need to understand what their value really is and aligning that with what matters to the people that they're speaking with and engaging with. And then I think this is the final two pieces are the things that I think will drive any business or business leader spare. One is waiting for that mythical return to normal. You know, again, we were talking about this before, you know, it's a unicorn, except that we're in this situation for the foreseeable future. It might get better and it might come back. It might get much better and it might come back. We don't know. But this is where we're at. It will pass eventually and we'll move to something else. But thinking that things are going to go back to pre-COVID, I think we just got to get over that and deal with what we've got in front of us. And the final piece of what's not working is inaction. And while I understand it, it's a human response to uncertainty and fear. It's not helpful to anyone. So, you know, customers will always need supplies or, you know, to do what they do. And so it's about who they choose to buy that from. And companies have to do what they can to make them want to buy from them.
That's great. And that's so much of what you said resonated with me. And I especially reflecting on the technology piece, because I think people are there's this move to grab at things that can save them money and get them more connected. But if it's just another annoyance and not building a real relationship, then that's not going to create anything, is it?
No, absolutely.
One last follow-up question. With regards to us going back into now day one, because I'm counting down the days. So, the announcement came on my birthday. That's not the present that I wanted, really. But day one of a 6-week lockdown, have you seen, you know, what's been the feedback from your customers? You know, the people who did, you know, some of that hard work previously, are they kind of going, we're in it, that's all right, we're in the groove? Or was there a little bit of, oh my God, what was it?
Yeah, a little bit of both, actually. So I spent most of yesterday actually reaching out just to see what they needed. Are they okay? Do they need anything else from me? And a few different things came back. So I have one client who's in the food distribution business, and they were just starting to obviously to sell again. And the great news for them is they've got a national business, so there's all of that other opportunity in 7 other states or 7 other regions in Australia, so that's okay. But yeah, Victoria, well, you know, that's going to be a bit of a blow. So what they decide to do about that, I don't really know yet. But again, I think that the businesses that are going to be okay, even with this announcement, are those that have just accepted that for the time being, we're all working from home. We haven't all gone back to the office now, have to migrate back. We're here. This is the most stable place we can be, and we need to continue doing what we're doing. And so they're the people that are using phone and video just to make contact, and it's business as usual for them. Okay, it's psychologically difficult, but the reality is actually that it's just the same.
All right. Thank you for that. Now, JR, so as the CEO of Strategy and Operations, what has been the reality of one of, you know, arguably one of Australia's great success stories, the Wilson Group? What have you guys been experiencing?
Look, I think it was, you know, we've found ourselves in a pretty strong position to prepare ourselves for the response recovery phases of this. And I think it was because we were quite well prepared going in. We were very well prepared in a financial sense, debt-free, cash positive, and therefore able to make good strategic decisions going into the crisis. We had, I guess, learnt off the back of previous crises, and this isn't an unexpected event. The timing might be, you know, you can't pin it down to a given month and a given year, but there have been pandemics before and there will be again. And so we had plans in place to respond to that. We had assessed the vulnerabilities in our businesses and also the strength in our businesses, and we were actually able to make some good decisions right throughout the crisis. So we actually went to a heightened state of alert, I guess, in January. By the 28th of February, we'd triggered our crisis management team. We triggered our pandemic plan, and that was at least 2 or 3 weeks in advance of most other organisations, and therefore we were able to prepare people, and most importantly, prepare people psychologically for what was, you know, a pretty testing period, and to be able to invest in resilience within that leadership group so that people were able to lead their teams effectively. Yeah.
Okay. And when we spoke previously, you were talking about some of the, I guess the different tools and decision making and ways to engage that I was really quite impressed that you had actually deployed very early, and were quite critical to the way that you actually responded.
Yeah, well, and I've probably got a couple of observations there. The first one is, I think, understanding what your organisation's decision-making tools are and how they function is absolutely critical. And so, you know, in our organisation, we've got some people who are comfortable making decisions with, say, 50 or 60% of the quality of information that they need, and some who really want to get to 100%. Now, I don't think there's an exact formula for this, but what I'm sure of is if in a time of crisis like we've been through, you're waiting for 100% of the information you need to make a decision, then the decision's probably going to be too late. Mm. And so that's my first rule is make a decision early, understand the risk implicit in that decision, mitigate the risk to the extent you can, and move on to the next decision, and keep working through, you know, decisions like that. And of course, that risk typically ultimately manifests itself financially. So you've got to be in a strong financial position at the start of it to be able to support that kind of decision making. I think for me, the greatest education I've had is from a lady that I hired almost by accident in January. And she started work on the 6th of January as our group communications manager. And she has been an absolute ball of energy and a source of great comfort and confidence to me, because she has absolutely grabbed that communications function across our group and taken it to a level 1 or 2 orders of magnitude above where it was. And so from the very outset, we put in place a very structured communication program, which ranged from emails out to all staff, and we're talking about 10,000 odd staff, to keep them informed about the decisions we were making, and also about the decisions we weren't making, because we were waiting for the situation to unfold. And so we were unable to communicate areas where we were awaiting greater certainty in a way that people didn't think things were being hidden from them, because that's, of course, I think a pretty natural human inclination. We convened the top 60 odd leaders in the business every fortnight in a Zoom call similar to this, to give them an update on what was going on across the business. And of course, our crisis management team met initially twice weekly, then out to weekly, and then we pushed it out to fortnightly. And now we've actually stopped the crisis management team meeting at all, because everything has now evolved into BAU processes. So it's part of our new DNA. So yeah, that communications, to give people some certainty, some security, some understanding, remove, in that I think Wendi referred before to a volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous environment. Well, the more of the volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity you can remove for your people, the greater comfort they have and the better able they are to make the decisions they've got to make day to day. So that's certainly been a real key focus for our leadership team.
Great, yeah. VUCA, that's some sociologist or psychologist came up with that acronym, and I just kind of thought, oh, it's just the new world order, isn't it? Is it the new normal with regards to VUCA? You also were talking about how some of your decision making within your organization, and just understanding, with that decision making criteria, understanding which one of the data points are, understanding the trends, understanding what might be accelerating or arresting, and what that means as you plan forward. What were some of those trends or observations that you've had?
Look, I think some of them relate internally to your business. Some of them relate externally to your different markets. So if I look at our parking business, look, I'm sure some algebraic whiz will work out a formula at some point to describe the relationship between people wanting to work from home and therefore reducing the commuter load into the CBDs of the cities, being offset by people not wanting to take public transport, therefore they're going to want to drive their private vehicles, therefore they're going to need to park them somewhere, which is offset by the City Council's strategy to reduce congestion in the CBD, and that's then again offset by the reduction in on-street parking, meaning people need to park off-street. So by the time you bring all those variables together, you've got a really complex picture that it takes some pretty clever people and some really, I think, powerful BI business intelligence tools to be able to evaluate. And I guess we've been in a position where we've been able to make some sense of some of those things. But I think the key, for me, one of the key areas is identifying that the use of cash is going to reduce, e-commerce is going to increase out of sight, and therefore our cyber threat has gone through the roof. So we've invested heavily in cyber security since March, and that has paid off on many, many occasions. And so if we invested a couple of $100,000, we're now at a point where we've probably saved ourselves far more than that, and that's just at the start of this whole event.
Yeah. So
I think that's a really key one. I think we're already seeing wage growth slow down, and that therefore, is an indicator into what our future economy is going to look like. We're seeing capital investment slow down, and certainly the appetite to risk capital is very soft. And then I guess initially I thought we would see a significant reduction in travel overall, and that's probably been the case. But I think what we will now see is an ongoing reduction in international travel and international arrivals into Australia. But I think that'll be at least offset by domestic travel, and people will holiday in Australia and they want to go to a different state, especially Victorians probably right now.
Yeah.
I think a reliance on global supply chains will get reevaluated. I think manufacturing in some areas, for example, pharmaceuticals, may well increase in Australia. I think those would be important opportunities to look at. And I think, I don't even, it's a whole different conversation as to what we think the sort of geopolitical trends might look like, and where China's prominence versus India's prominence in the Indo-Pacific and those sorts of things might all land. But I think an event like this will trigger some of those changes as well.
Yeah, I would agree. Thank you for those insights. Now, Marianne, I have gleefully stolen your phrases when talking about our response to COVID. It's the respond phase. Hopefully businesses have done the tackling of responding to it, but now really moving into recovery, but really focusing on, what do they need to do now so that they can move on into Thrive. And it's not as though Thrive's going to happen next week. It could be in a couple of years or so when we're maybe out of the recession. But I'm really keen to understand from you in terms of what do you believe that we should be focusing on now?
Yeah, so it's really not my framework, but it's almost every consulting firm has one. So if you look across Mercer, McKinsey, Deloitte, you'll see that these are the kind of evidence-based frameworks that people use when they are in a situation like this. And, in a way, we've been in too much of a lull in terms of not adapting to Industry 4.0, and then we've been thrown into Industry 5.0 with 1 week notice, which is the virtual age. And so what we have is a clash of 4.0 and 5.0 converging with each other. And so the respond phase was probably a lot more difficult than a lot of people thought about. We just did not build the resilience and the diversity into our businesses and the flexibility of our resources so that we could move them around. And so it was quite a tough respond phase. And we really should move out of respond now. I see some of my clients being a little bit lazy and not being probably a little bit tough enough in terms of we need to get on with it now and start delivering or start producing something else or start changing our markets so that we can actually recover properly. Thrive is interesting. I think that you can move between recover and thrive. It's a bit like I was saying to someone, it's reverse culture shock. You're on a roller coaster. You might have just felt you were on top of it just before this lockdown, and now you just, whoa, what's going on? I'm regressing again. And then you're up at the top again. So assume that recover and thrive is going to be a roller coaster ride with reverse culture shock. That first time you went out to a restaurant and you couldn't believe you're actually sitting down and having a meal. And the first time you went to have your hair cut and you were like, oh, this is so weird. And now it's like, oh, I can't do that anymore. So now there's another reverse culture shock happening. Your people are just going through all of that. So let's talk about, we've responded. Maybe you've done that well or not well. I think what you need to do is to think about what can you leverage from that in terms of the human relationships you've created and showing your people the care. You don't want to lose that opportunity. You want to leverage that into recovery. So recovery has a couple of phases. You really need to take time to reflect. You need to say what has worked and not worked, and what perspectives and opportunities do we want to take with us from the respond phase. Have you taken time to sit down? Have you asked your people? Don't assume you know. Have you asked them what worked for them, what didn't work for them? Do they want to come back to work? Don't they want to come back to work? How are they feeling? You really need time to reflect. You also have to recommit to your people. It's almost like you have to onboard them into a new organization because it's not the same place they were in before. And you have to recommit, I think, on a couple of levels. you've got to recommit to their physical well-being. If you don't recommit to their physical and mental well-being, you've got to say to them, we do care in the spirit we're in, especially for your physical and mental well-being. We also care about your financial well-being. We might be reducing your salary, but we care. We really care. And we want to work with you on how we can manage those financial concerns, so that there's a sense of a recommitment from the business to its people. And then you work with that reflection and recommitment into re-engaging them. Now, in the re-engagement phase, you're going to have to redeploy your workforce. There's very few people I know that can deploy their people exactly into the same roles with the same capabilities on the same projects. So how do you take what you have and redeploy them, especially over the 6 months and then 12 months and then 2 years, into places where it really makes sense to have their skills, and give them development to get there? You know, you really have to say, what are the key reskilling bits that I can put in place so that we can respond to rapid evolving organizational priorities? Once you've done that, you'll get into rethinking what you've learned from that phase, into rethinking your workforce, and your workplace. Don't do that too fast. Just notice what's happening as you redeploy them, as you reskill them. Then you can say, right, who works virtually, who works locally, is it hybrid, is it not, you know, what kind of diversification have we gone through? That's when you say, okay, it looks like we have an operating model change converging here, and it looks like we have a new people strategy emerging here, a new business emerging here. Now we can reboot our priorities and our budgets. You're going to have to be very, very flexible with that in the shorter term.
That's amazing. One of the things that I remember discussing with you was when we were talking about complexity and uncertainty, you enlightened me with some of the paradoxes that we as leaders will be confronted with, and they play right into how we actually create more agile workspaces. Share those with us.
Yeah, I think that one of the challenges of this, I think you should see it, if you're a positive outward looking person, you should see this as the best leadership development opportunity you could ever wish for. It isn't going to get any more complex and challenging than this, right? So what you've got to say is, where do I need to lift my game? You need to lift your game to be more of a systems thinker, right? You really have to think about make sense of the environment and the context, and then being able to hold paradoxes and not be so worried about choosing one side over the other. Because if you think about complexity asks of us to think future, act local and immediate, but think future and start to create the future at the same time. So you also have to, here are some of them, slow down and go fast at the same time. Some things you've got to slow down on, others you've got to go faster on. So you need to think about, which ones do we need to slow down on, learn some more, find out more, think through, get more information, and which ones do we, like JR said, just get going and learn from it. You know, dive in, do it, learn. The second thing that's happening, second paradox, is we are in very high technology, but our people are craving human touch, and our clients. So how do we leverage technology but make people feel like they're still individually important to us, that we care, that we see them as a human, that we know that they've got, you know, family and kids and care responsibilities and all those things. So how do you balance that high-tech human touch with each other? The third one, and you'll be in that slap bang in recovery, you're going to have to axe any fat in your business and preserve all the muscle. You cannot axe the muscle. If you axe the muscle, there's no way you're coming out of this. So do you know what the muscle is? Do you know how to scale that muscle, how to use it? But you also know where we are over-engineering things, where our clients might not need that level. You know, make sure you axe the fat where you can. The fourth one is depending on the size of your business, but I have clients who are really having to globalize some things very quickly to leverage, but also really localize at the same time. Even in Australia right now, you've got to localize what's happening in Victoria, and then you've got to work differently in your other regions. So how do you balance that so that it's not a one size fits all? The fifth one, there's two more. we have to embrace flexibility. We have to embrace virtual work. But how do you enhance some of your controls so that it doesn't spin out of control? How do you keep performance management running and still give people feedback? How do you govern some of these things that are happening so that people feel they've got a lot of flexibility how they work, but they are still very accountable? And the last one is what I said to you earlier: empathize and display tough love at the same time. Because, you know, I think that we are empathizing a lot and our people have been craving it, and it's probably the most important leadership skill you can have. But on the other hand, if you don't, it's a bit like if you indulge people for so long, you know, and you're actually not moving the business forward and achieving some of your outcomes, you could put it in a spin where everybody's futures are in jeopardy. So you do need to get back into more of a performance and a feedback mode and moving on and trying new things and getting people who don't want to change to step with you. You just need to really hold that balance carefully.
Mm-hmm. And I you know, I reflect back what you said just a few moments ago in terms of this being the most incredible leadership development opportunity, and it's true, because those paradoxes are brilliant because they don't make sense. They're at polar opposites, and yet you need to manage the push, the pull, the yin, the yang, or whatever. So from your point of view, Marianne, what would you see in terms of, you know, and in some ways leaders, gosh, we need to be good at everything, but in reality we're human, so maybe it's about getting people with it that, around us, that complement us. But what are some of the really critical leadership skills that you see that, you know, that business leaders must have to help kind of maneuver and juggle the roller coaster of recovery and thrive?
I think in terms of the skill sets that you can balance, you don't have to be the digital expert and the analytics expert and the marketing expert, all those things. So you look at, you know, where are my strengths in my team and in my ecosystem, and you work with the best of everything to get that done. What I do think every leader should have is a level of personal agility. So the book I wrote is exactly about this. So after 28 years of looking at how adaptive leadership works, we know that there are some mindsets, and there are mindsets. They're not personalities, so there's absolutely no excuse. They're all learnable. They're not easy, but they're learnable. There's some mindsets that either help you survive and thrive in complex realities or make you sink. And there are really 6 of them that we have identified. And you need to work your way through that. And the first one is growth mindset. You've heard about this. If you don't have a fixed mindset, you are going to struggle so much in a VUCA world. You need to challenge yourself on being able to learn new things, being able to use tools. Like I've had to learn how to use Miro and Mural, design thinking, online tools within a week so that I can run global leadership programs effectively with people. You know what? I cannot sit here and feel sorry for myself that I'm not digitally able. I just have to do it. Lean into it, learn, practice, get better at it, make mistakes, get on with it, right? It's you absolutely have to have a growth mindset, and your people have to have a growth mindset, and you have to challenge language. You've got to challenge language like we can't. It has to be we can't yet. We don't know how to do it yet. You've got to, in your language as a leader, have growth language. It's critical. The second thing is an old one, but no one's good at it, is self-awareness. No, I think that if you don't know what your blind spots are, you know, emotions are incredibly contagious, and even if you're virtual. So you better sort that out as a leader in terms of how you show up, and how be aware of your blind spots and be aware of how you are responding to this crisis, because your people are taking cues from you. So how are you showing up, and do you know what your blind spots are, and are you becoming too controlling, too perfectionistic, or are you able to hold those things in check? The third one is grit. Can you hold on? Can you persevere? This is going to take all the perseverance you have for those long-term goals, because you are going to hit so many. What do? You get up and you move on and you keep that long-term goal in place. The fourth one is emotional agility and positivity. So, you know what? Deal with those emotions. Stop telling yourself they're not there. When you're tired, rest. You are going to be more tired. So lean into those emotions and deal with them, and also lean into your people's emotions, but start to also be more positive and hopeful. Start to talk about what's possible. Stop focusing on all the things that are going wrong. You are exhausting your people. The next one, I think, is a superpower, and that's focus, becoming indistractable. Stop being so distracted. Focus on a few small things with your people. Be consistent about it. Just absolutely laser sharp focus is what you need. Switch off the news for a day. Switch off those emails and things, and just get focused on pieces of deep work and deep thinking. And finally is your relationships. This is a great time to work very hard at getting clear. You can very easily have what I call interpersonal mush when everybody's virtual, and misunderstandings. Get really, really clear with people about what your observations are, what your thoughts are, what your feelings are, and what you want, so that when they walk away, they know what your whole experience is, and you are interested in what their experience is. You check in so that you don't assume what's going on with your people, and then assume what's going on with you. Same with your clients. It's clear. I call that a clear relationship. The clearer they are, the better you're going to get along. So focus on that. Personal agility is necessary for organizational agility, and organizational agility is necessary to survive this. I actually thought I'll end with a little quote for you, because I love it, from Haruki Murakami, if you like to read his books. He says, "And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through or how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain, when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what the storm is all about."
That's brilliant. That's lovely. You're going to have to send that through to me so we can send that through to everybody afterwards. That was unbelievable. And I was reflecting, you're going through all of these paradoxes and all of that. I was reflecting on what Ingrid shared and what JR shared. And, because I'm a talker, and I don't know if anybody on has picked up on that or not, but one of the things I love that JR did, and whether or not it was incredible management skills and by him, which I'll give him credit for, but at the hiring of that comms manager, keeping those engagements with people, being in contact with them, letting them know what's going on. Because if we don't tell them, people always make it up, and what they make up is always far worse than what's really there. And that helps that new culture, that recommitment and re-engagement you were talking about, Marianne, that's so critical. And I think I can see Richard made a little comment in there. I'll get you, Richard. But for me, that's the really big thing. And I think that it's in these times, when we've never been in these times before, we've actually we're cutting one another a bit of slack. We know that nobody's an expert in this. And so I think there's a lot of that camaraderie, that calibration. We're stronger together, and by working together, we'll all get through this. And you need to talk to people. You need to be vulnerable. You need to show up and say, this is what I've got. This is what I need help with. And, and that's when I'm just reflecting on everything that you guys have shared. And it's so powerful. What I would like to do is kind of open up to questions and see if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask. And Jade, thank you so patiently for asking your question of JR ages ago, and I can see that he's responded. But are there any other questions? Anything we want to open up to the group?
Wendi, I actually was just reflecting as I listened to Marianne and on her first point, and just jump in, make mistakes, make it happen. I definitely found, and I won't take any credit at all for the communications, because it really has been the efforts of a really amazing young woman, and she has driven it herself, and in spite of resistance from some parts of the business, I'd add. But what I will take credit for is with our HSE team and our risk team, and they came to me very early in the piece and said, we don't know if this is actually going to meet the requirements, this plan and this part of the plan and these procedures, and we've reviewed this, but we don't know. I go, well, what do you think? Well, we just don't know it because we haven't done it before. And I said, mate, no one's done it before. So just don't worry about it. And just if you think that's the best, then I'll sign off on it and that's the best we got. And if we find something wrong with it, we'll fix it and we'll keep going. And so creating that environment where people were not afraid to make mistakes, that was key to our resilience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fundamental, isn't it? Because we're gonna fail in this. So we actually just need to do something. And so often people wait for perfection, you know, and perfection actually just gets in the way of progress. Now, Michael, are you typing? Do you have a question? Would you just go ahead and unmute? I'll unmute you. Hold on.
Okay, thank you. It's just it's a long question, so I might as well. Love the presentation, thank you, and lots of really good insights. I just want to kind of play a little bit of the devil's advocate in a sense, and that is that I've attended quite a few of those Zoom seminars over the last 2-3 months, like most of us. And I keep hearing these beautiful ideas, very good ideas about how businesses should become agile, change focus, upskill people, and so on. But to me, it feels like we're kind of missing a conversation at a deeper level. Our economic models, you know, we need to revisit those. The way that we still lack in balance in our leadership in terms of the gender balance and so on. I think those sort of elements are a lot more fundamental to the kind of changes that we need to go collectively and individually, that for that matter, before we can actually deal with this new reality. I think kind of tweaking the old to fit the new in a different speed and a different kind of setup, it will work, but it's not actually going to resolve the fundamental core issue, which is we don't have a very good relationship with each other and with the planet. And I think that's where the changes that we want to go to as a collective in order to be able to deal with the remnants of this crisis, because I don't think it's the first and last crisis of its kind. If we continue to do work and business the way we've done it before, we're just going to see bigger and bigger blips of this kind into our systems. So that's the thinking and the conversations that I yearn to hear. And I think, Marianne, you've alluded to it a bit in the way that you talked about empathy and compassion and interconnectedness and all that. But I'm just curious to hear your thoughts about that from anyone. Yeah.
Marianne, did you want to tackle that?
Yeah, look, Michael, you're right. And of course, if we can solve that, you and I together, we would be extremely wealthy, because they are very big societal challenges, right? Because we're sitting with Trump in the US, and we're sitting with, Bolsonaro in Brazil, and we're sitting with China, America challenges with each other. So you're right, longer term, for us to thrive and survive, we have to absolutely tackle those things. What has been incredibly encouraging for me was the convergence actually of Black Lives Matter and social pressure with COVID. And I think those things will, in the longer term, create the change I'm seeing. I think we still have to do all the things we're saying on these Zooms, by the way, because we have to be what I call hopeful realists, right? I used to be an optimistic ideologist, but now I'm a hopeful realist. And it's helped me a lot to say, to be that, because we have to lean into the immediate challenges. Longer term, what I'm seeing, which for me is incredibly encouraging, is that you see CEOs and companies taking a stand on matters of Black Lives Matter or whatever those things are. And so what I'm seeing very differently now, this time round with COVID and social disruption, unfortunately, we're not there with climate yet, but we're going to get there because the investors are starting to invest differently, is that we are starting to have CEOs and companies making statements on LinkedIn, everywhere else, that is so different, and pulling social purpose and taking a stand. And for me, that is a pivot point like I've never seen before. And I think in there's an opportunity for us longer term to step into quite a different space.
Right. JR, Ingrid, anything to add?
Sorry, JR.
No, you go, Ingrid, sorry.
Yeah, look, I would just really like to pick up on what Michael said, and just about some of those other things that are fundamental. I actually have a lot of optimism around the fact that you know, this mammoth change has been enforced on us, and unfortunately, because we're human beings, I think we kind of need something forced upon us if we're going to change it all. And I know that Marianne kind of alluded to that earlier, but I think that this is an opportunity, if we choose to see it like this, for something totally different, for a totally different way of doing business, a totally different way of connecting with each other. And I think that human need at a very deep level for connection will never go away. It's just a matter of how we foster that through these times and how we see that we are indeed incredibly connected. For example, in Australia at the moment, we're looking at Victoria, and it's Victoria's issue. It's not. It's everyone's issue, because we're an Australian market, and by extension, we're a global market. And we've seen that, you know, unless we continue to look for ways in which we can make each other's paths a little bit smoother, whether that be supply chain, service, sales, leadership, platforms, whatever, you know, we're going to be out on our own, and we can't afford to do that. So I actually think this is a great opportunity for us to really start to think about things in a different way and then respond differently as well.
Yeah. That's exactly what I mean. Indeed, that's the sort of conversation that I feel we invited to sort of. I liked what you said about leaning into, Marianne. We invited to lean into this discomfort because it will be uncomfortable for us to think about, you know, our consumption and our habits and all that. So, yeah.
The other thing that I was going to add, Michael, I really did like your question, and I think an organisation that really deeply understands its purpose, mm-hmm. and understands that purpose connects to the community and the environment will make good decisions.
Mm. Yeah. Totally agree. I just feel we often see lack of that sort of understanding. Yeah. Although things are changing, of course. I mean, we're having those conversations in a sense. We didn't have them 5-10 years ago, but it still feels like this is a sort of a reminder, a gentle reminder from bigger forces to go there.
And maybe it's more than a reminder, you know, maybe this is, you know, the series of events that we're happy to go through now, maybe it will accelerate our learnings. And thank you, I got a yes from Ingrid. But I do have faith that people will change. And, you know, I always learned long before, when people know better, they tend to do better. And so it just comes back to the conversations and collaborating with one another. And, you know, have friends, you know, that don't agree with you. And I've got many friends who I love dearly, and who challenge me every day on my myopic viewpoint. So we all need that. No, thank you, Marianne. You were quick to chuckle.
We had wonderful conversations, Michael, Wendi, and I.
And I'm never right, but anyway, I live one day in hope. Now we do have another question from Peter. He has asked, what advice do you have for how we maintain the speed of decision making and clarity of priorities when we leave the crisis phase of what we are going through?
JR, go for it.
Learn what data you didn't have to be able to make, you know, what data points did you not have access to be able to get to early decisions, and change your systems to provide that data. And that will enable faster decision making. Yeah.
Was that good, Peter? Do you have a follow-up? Are you unmuting yourself? There you go.
Trying to work out how to do it. Yes. Hello, Marianne.
Hello, Peter.
I think what I've found quite amazing is that all of the bureaucracy that we generally deal with, the silos and the functions fighting with each other over who gets to do what and how and who and whatever, that's just disappeared over the last 4 months. And the decisions that the organisation's been able to make, usually going back to what are our values and what is the right thing to do, have been incredibly quick. And what I don't want us to do is go back to what we had 4 months ago in 4 months' time. And we're doing a lot of thinking at the moment about how do we build on what we've been through rather than go back first and then work out where to go. No doubt that the data and the systems is a critical one, and we've got a lot of work to do on that. But the leadership the empowerment of our people, the clarity of priorities, and then getting out of their way has been impressive to see over the last 4 months. And for some reason, it wasn't there before that. And I'd like to keep it when we go back to whatever that back looks like sometime in the future.
Peter, there's another little tool that I have, which I'll send you because we know each other. It's called the Refocus tool. And I think that's something that you actually should be using as you step forward, right? So what do we want to leave behind? What do we want to take with? What do we want to refocus on? Actually doing that quite formally and capturing all those insights, and then also cross-checking it with real data would be a great thing to do. So when people are, I've got something called a remote canvas tool, which people use.
Oh,
team.
Marianne, we're losing
Let's
you.
refocus. Let's formalize the learnings. Let's have an agreement.
Okay. All right, we lost you there for a little bit, Marianne, but if that refocus tool is available for everyone, we're happy to share that out to all of the attendees as well. Now we've got, I think we've kind of got one final question from Richard. Will we look more nationally rather than internationally to grow our businesses? Can we just exist as a nation without requiring to sell, grow internationally? Can we just be an island and not rely internationally?
No, I don't believe that is possible, but I think there'll be a few different impacts. I think if you look at the strain currently between Australia and China concerns me with the Chinese markets. So I think I think there will be alternative markets developed by Australia to sell into, and I think global supply chains will shift and will change along with those geopolitical adjustments, I guess, as they occur, and so I think we'll see less sales to and purchasing from China, and who fills that void? Well, that'll be an interesting adventure for all of us. In the meantime, I think if it was tourism related, it depends on the industry as well, but a tourism related industry absolutely will be dependent on domestic demand.
Okay, great. Does that answer your question, Richard?
It's just a really complex question. It's a bit more than what I just put in the thing. It was more just to stimulate some thoughts. I assume everybody can hear me? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that was all the questions that we've had for today. I would really love to thank our panelists, Marianne Roux, Ingrid Maynard, and John Rogers. It was phenomenal having you here with us this afternoon, and the insights that you've shared. I've been, I've spoken to you guys previously and all of that, but I've still took copious amounts of notes. So I thank you so much, and look forward to engaging again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Wendi. Thank you, Kate. Thanks, guys. Thanks, JR.
Bye, everybody.